Welcome, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Hire Calling podcast. I'm Pete Newsome, and this is your source for all things hiring, staffing, and recruiting, and even more today, because I'm joined by someone who I'm really excited to have on the show, Jason Gamel, who I've known for about 15 years now, almost. I think a long time. I remember the first conversation we had in the parking lot of my office, and I sat in the car for about 45 minutes, and we just kept talking and really hit it off. So Jason's someone that is just one of my favorite people. He is the president and CEO of the American Resort Development Association, a role that he's been in since 2019. And Jason is an attorney. Jason has been in the hospitality and timeshare industry a long time. Jason is also a graduate of the University of Florida Law School, and I still like him despite that. But genuinely, one of my favorite people. So Jason, thank you for coming on today.
Oh, Pete, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember that conversation that I referenced, but I was sitting in my car and somehow we bonded immediately over being the same age and being in school at the same time, where you were at University of Michigan when I was at FSU, undergrad, and we got to talk about college football for the entire time, I think.
It's what binds us all together, Pete. It truly continues to be a strong one as well.
Absolutely. So you're in DC, you've got the Capitol in the background. I want to talk about life there a little bit because you are at the heart of where all the action is right now. But Jason, first, let's talk a little bit about ARDA. I'm very familiar with who ARDA is, but maybe if you could just start by just describing the association and what you guys represent.
Love to, Pete. American Resort Development Association has been around for just a little over 50 years now. It's gone over and through some iterations during time about being the American Land Development Association, the American Resort and Recreation Association. It's had a lot of different, I'd say, interests it's represented, from campgrounds to resorts to lot sales in the beginning. Today, it's best known for its representation of the timeshare and vacation ownership industries. And we do it a few different ways. We have ARDA, which is the Development Association representing those active timeshare developers, many of which I'm sure your listeners are familiar with, such as the Disney Vacation Club, Marriott Vacations Worldwide, now Travel and Leisure. We have Hilton Grand Vacations, Holiday Inn Club, Westgate Resorts, Blue Green Vacations, just a number of those that are large developers, most of them based in Central Florida or South Florida. We also have ARDA International Foundation, which does industry-wide research, which is a great way for education and information to be produced, and the American Resort Owners Coalition, ARDA Rock, which is a neat thing that many people don't realize, is that from a legislative standpoint, the advocacy work we do it on behalf of timeshare owners as much as we do it on behalf of timeshare developers. So we're getting a 360-degree view of the industry, whether it's on the resort side, whether it's the owner side, the development side, and real estate, and this wonderful product and all the amazing experiences that come with it. That is all that we do at the Trade Association, having meetings, running research, and generally speaking, providing a marketplace for our members to do business.
And it's a really large organization that, as you said, that has a lot going on. How many members do you have?
Over 400 at this point in time. Our industry, like many others, has seen some consolidation, which is a healthy thing. We tell everybody when people are consolidating. We've got some very big players now that are Wall Street giants, which is great to have. But the number of players seem to be reducing. The size, though, of the industry continues to grow, whether we're looking at the number of resorts that are out there, which are just a little over 1,550 resorts in the United States. Or if you look at the timeshare number of timeshare families, this number gets a lot of people. We're just a hair under 10 million families in the United States that actually own timeshare.
So that I didn't realize the number was that big.
It's a pretty big number that people don't quite get, that there's 10 million families in the country that own and use their timeshare, which is fantastic.
So I remember when you were thinking of taking the job, because it was a big move, it was your dream job to move. You'd worked for ARDA for a number of years prior to working for Wyndham, right, where you served in a VP role there. And you went to ARDA in 2019, moved your family to DC, and March 2020 happens.
And here we are. It was you're right, Pete, this was a fantastic opportunity for us. I've got kids and they were excited about the move to the district, a little bit nervous It feels as I tell people, and it feels this way. Any dystopian novel you've ever read, and there's a capital city somewhere, that
That's
capital city is Washington,
that's
D.C.,
it.
right?
That's
It's
it.
where people, they dress differently, they act a little different. It is a very metropolitan city. Obviously, it's a worldly city, lots of activity and energy around it and all of its surrounding areas. It is a really neat place to experience and live. Like so many others, when they adjusted or go to adjust to a new place, there's a time period it takes to get used to a new job, to start getting your feet settled. And it's either call it unfortunate or just one more trial that you had to pass during the process of getting onboarded when March of 2020 took place. And it was a particularly interesting one for us, as we had just hosted on March 7th a large meeting of our members at the St. Regis Hotel in downtown Washington, D.C., which, for those of you who are listening who know this St. Regis on the corner of K and 16th Street, it is now the B in Black Lives Matter Boulevard,
Okay.
which, right in front of it is where the B is. And so you look at that hotel where we were on March 6th, and at this point in time, at best, we were making fun of the people we saw with masks on, who wore them on planes. A few people were talking about should we be shaking hands or not, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. Most of including the expert we had from Congress telling us about where we would expect to be in 3 or 4 months. And we were looking at something that might last into the fall of 2020, but there shouldn't be too much to worry about. Obviously, that was not the case. It was much different as far as the experience, but I will say this much. As difficult as it was, and we'll set aside for a second personal loss and issues, which are very tragic for people who've lost loved ones over the last several years or last year and a half, or lost jobs. For us as an association, and I think most businesses out there was an opportunity in a time in which we looked and said, what we need to do is take a good hard look at our business when we were just like so many other people, sitting in our homes, wondering what our futures were like. Besides the human side of it, when we looked at the business side, it was an opportunity to say, where are we going from this point forward? How do we address issues that we've been dealing with for a long period of time? And as a new leader, it was also an opportunity to look at the organization, look at our industry, and hopefully set the course for the next 50 years for our trade association.
Yeah, and in our lifetime, there's been these moments, right? When the space shuttle crashed. I remember where I was then, 9/11, and I don't think as impactful and intense as those times were. I don't think they pale in comparison to what happened in that time, where everything we thought was thrown out the window, and we didn't know what was going to happen next. And it's really been, I think, even since that time, almost 2 years now, we've had to rewrite rules, make things up as we go, and kind of just learn an entirely new way of doing things. So I think of you in that time where clearly you went there very excited, with lots of ideas in mind, and probably had to throw out the business plan, very, very quickly, and start over almost, and figuring out what, how you're going to navigate the organization, right? I mean, that is no small task.
No, it wasn't. And it was, I will say, this is where I credit the people that were in the organization that we, at that point, particular time, we have some great leaders and some people who were up for the task. We, like many others, had to downscale or downsize our operations. We needed different things all of a sudden. And we were a bit fortunate at having some foresight in June of 2020, or it should be January of 2020, having installed Zoom technology all throughout our office in Florida and also in Washington, D.C. Had no idea how we were going to use Zoom at that point in time. Maybe a conference call once in a while,
right?
But it seemed like it was worth the expenditure to be prepared. Little did we know just how much we would rely on it, as much as we do today, and how valuable that has been, not only for us, but I will say this, it's actually made us money, because we've been able to sublease a lot of our space and our DC office that we don't need. And one of the biggest attractions is the fact that it's a fully Zoom capable office with a conference room set up with 2 huge 92-inch screen monitors in there for Zoom calls. And it's an attractive feature that we just happened to stumble upon.
Great foresight, right?
Yeah.
We experienced something somewhat similar, where we had started using the option to work at home as sort of a reward based, thing that we were doing. And everyone loved it. We started to do it more. That was something we began in around 2018. And so by the time 2020 came around, we no longer had desk phones. We were used to using soft phones already. So the transition was very, very easy. But the social aspect of it, the cultural aspect of it is an entirely different matter. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Your industry, of course, was impacted as much, if not more than any. Being in the hospitality space, where when people can't go to resorts, that is worst case scenario. How did you guys address that from a messaging standpoint? I can't imagine the conversations you were having with all the uncertainty of how long that was going to last, but your leadership had to have been really put to the test. New into the role. And so how did you navigate that in discussions with the members?
We had two tracks or two paths we'll take. For one was trying to coordinate the best way to communicate that it was safe to travel, or that our resorts were doing the things they could to make it as safe as possible based upon what we knew. The second track was trying to figure out state by state, county by county, city by city, whose rules applied to who needed to be shut down, who could still stay open, which resorts could, and members had to make decisions such as sales and marketing activity. Could you still sell in this environment? Did you still want to sell during this environment? Was it appropriate to ask people to buy timeshare, buy more vacation time when many of us weren't even allowed to leave our house per rule or regulation? How do you do this, and how do you adapt to it? Our members had a lot of decisions they had to make. They had to make those decisions because on top of all of this, unlike a hotel, which is pretty easily a commercial operation, people realize that it's transient accommodations, it's commercial. So therefore, when somebody says, and these are hotels, either had to shut down or they could if they housed essential workers, for instance, or there was some exemption they found. For us, we were mostly residential. Almost all the time is timeshare residential, and many times it's property ownership. So how do you deny someone the right for them to stay in their property? And that was a challenge for many of our members to have to make decisions. Well, do you shut it all down? And you can never really shut the resort down. It's got to stay open. You've got health and safety issues if you shut the water off, right? If the water starts running, hello, Legionnaire's disease.
Right.
No one wants that. So you had to keep this sense of the buildings had to keep someone operating. And for some jurisdictions that stayed, we'll just call it stayed open more than others, or didn't have as many of the restricted elements as others did. For instance, either Hawaii was one that we've seen stay very much in the conservative mode, just the same way we did for a number of properties or locations that were high elevations. There are just not that many hospitals in Vail. So if you have a problem that runs through Vail, you've got real serious issues. So we understand every place had this different nuance to it. And that was really tough for workers. So you didn't know what your needs were going to be from time to time. You didn't know what your needs were going to be short-term or long-term. And we did see a number of people in almost every business out there, unless you were Zoom or you were working for Amazon or Walmart delivery services.
Right.
You found yourself needing to scale down to begin with because you just didn't know. And then have to figure out, how do you communicate to owners? How do you tell them what their rights are? What do you do with people who had reservations to take vacations all throughout the year? What are they going to do with their properties? And how do you make sure that you're in constant communication? And for those who are showing up at your resort, how are you going to make that stay as comfortable as possible and protect your workers? Because there were so many things that were unknown. You had to protect your work staff. And a little different, like you were talking about, Pete, when you had the office and you were doing a work from home, well, there is no work from home, right, for a housekeeper, or no work from home for necessarily from a salesperson who does their craft face to face. And that was a big challenge. We could talk about that too. There's a lot there, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the people aspect of it. But something that just occurred to me while you were talking, mentioning Hawaii versus Colorado. Not only do you have to figure out how to navigate the danger, the risks, the uncertainty, but you had to consider each individual state and the rules and regulations they have, which needless to say are very widely from state to state. As a Floridian, what we're experiencing here, I consider to be fortunate compared to what's happening in places where a lot of the resorts are located that don't have much freedom and flexibility because of certain state laws, right? I mean, that had to be an incredibly frustrating thing to try to wade through.
It was. We were almost hoping for something to come from the federal government that just said, this is the way it's going to be. And so that way there'd be some guidance. In lieu of it, we tried to, for instance, on health and safety standards, we tried to put out minimum health and safety guidelines, or ARDA safe welcome guidelines, that we put on our website, we publicized, we tried to give people some minimum things that they could do that were best practices in the industry if you were going to maintain health and safety standards to a person who might feel more comfortable traveling. But you found everyone did something different. And some people Cloroxed everything. They did some great, you saw some partnerships, I believe it was with Hilton and Lysol. You had different people that were partnering with Ecolab and making sure that they could say that they were killing 99.9% of all viruses. We had one member in Colorado, that actually brought in those big UV light stands, commercial UV light, and would put them in the commercial areas at night from 11 a.m. or from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. They would disinfect via UV light. Some people chose kind of a good old fashioned, we're just going to leave that room empty for a week and realize that all viruses will die in a week or so, and that will be clean. We'll give it a normal clean, but we'll just make sure that there's enough time in between occupants that you could feel safe about whatever's in there isn't going to hurt you. It was amazing. And it was so different from every place you went. And every member has a little different viewpoint on, we'll call it risk tolerance, or how best to operate, and knows their customer well and which ones want to travel. And what we found, there was a large group, a significant group of owners and travelers that were determined to travel regardless of the situation and do it their way and as safe as possible. And that's where we saw people going drive-to distances. They didn't have to get on planes. They got to the resorts. Timeshares have natural social distancing that takes place. When you're inside your unit, there's multiple bedrooms. There's full kitchens. You have room to bring food in if places were closed, or go to the supermarket, buy your food, cook it in if you need to. I did it 3 or 4 times during the pandemic. We took drive-to vacations in timeshare resorts. We ordered in quite a bit so we could still support local businesses. But then we felt comfortable, and actually it was great to have family time. It was just great family time to be able to spend in the unit. And that was something that we saw in a big way.
I've had a number of conversations over the past year where, looking back with some hindsight on that time period where everyone was scared to some degree, and worried, but it forced us to spend time that we otherwise wouldn't have with family and loved ones. And many people, and I'm one of them, look at that and are somewhat thankful for it, even though there's a guilt factor involved, right? Like I had, all 4 of my kids, my older 2 who would have been in college, not home, home for an extended period of time. And that's time I otherwise wouldn't have had. And so I am thankful for that. And vacations, take on a different meaning, I think, as certainly in that time, but probably, I would guess that's going to persist, right? Where, being in staffing, we talk about the great resignation a lot, where so many people have chosen to leave the workforce. But I think that has to, have a similar effect for the hospitality industry, where people are going to value that time more than they ever have, because they now realize the importance of it, and time being precious as a whole. So has that been maybe a benefit to some degree on the other side of it, even though we wouldn't have wished for it, clearly, but maybe can still acknowledge that benefit is real?
It has been. There has been a lot of that recognition and realization of just how much time we've really appreciated being together and how we want to keep it going. I think a lot of us have made a commitment not to ignore those things that maybe had not seen as much attention before, whether it was your family time or vacation time. Just even for me, it was taking a bike ride at lunchtime with my kids.
Right.
What a great way to spend a half hour, 45 minutes, get some exercise, do something that I otherwise wouldn't have done. But to make sure you keep doing it, don't stop. Don't let that workplace stress creep back into what was a very good cadence that we had in managing stress, managing the workload, and taking advantage of the time, just as you did with your kids who came back from school. You realized you got some time that you weren't going to get back. They weren't going to come back. Well, I had to say this much. You probably hope they don't come back after college necessarily to spend too much time at home.
Hope
But
they come back close. How's that?
come back close, but not in the house, perhaps all the
Exactly.
time. So we realized this is a great time to spend with folks, and really, how can you do it? And we saw that a lot through our industry. Our resort managers heard that a lot. The salespeople heard it a lot. Everyone knew that, this is the way I want to continue to vacation. I could do it safely. I felt comfortable. It was great spending time with family and friends. We continued to make memories. We did so in a way that they thought it was being very responsible in their own definition of responsible. They were supporting local communities, which was really important, as timeshare resorts have. And we've seen this through, whether it was 9/11, it was the economic recession of 08, 09. We forget, this is not the first pandemic we've really sort of said. There was SARS pandemic we had before. There were other things that have happened where we've had health scares, or we have had other types of natural disasters or tragedies. And as far as our industry is, because it is a prepaid product, people do buy it and then use it. Because of it, they're not likely to cancel it or just let it go. They're going to go ahead and use it. And we saw that a lot this pandemic, and we're seeing it. We talk about the Great Resignation, but we also have heard that term revenge travel or revenge spending.
Right.
That people are now, well, we saw that in our industry significantly. People almost were saying to the pandemic, you're not going to stop me, just watch, I'm going to buy more. I'm going to spend more time vacationing and more time with my family, just to spite this idea that you are trying to tell me not to go out of my house, or this is otherwise going to stop us from living our lives as best we can.
I love it. I do. But like so many things, almost everything right now in our society, it becomes polarizing, right? So for every one of those people, I would think there's someone on the opposite side who's not going to leave because of fear. Have you seen that start to subside? I mean, to me, it seems, and this is anecdotal, but the rain is subsiding and the sun's shining again, and people are coming out of their house. So are you seeing that happen? And then also along those lines, are you seeing people take advantage of being able to work from anywhere now? Also, one of the unexpected positive outcomes, I think, personally, from the pandemic is rethinking how we work and how we spend our time and where we spend our time. So I want to talk about that a little bit, but are you seeing that effect? Are you seeing the upturn from that yet?
We have had the chance to really work with a group called the Back to Normal Barometer, Pete. They're a research group that do some amazing work across the hospitality, golf course, they're into the overall world of travel. And we've been able to survey on a bi-weekly basis a pool of timeshare owners, because they've got some in their research pool. So we've been measuring sentiment every other week for the last year.
I love that phrase, because that's what you just summed up what it took me 30 seconds to try to describe, but thank you.
We get back to sentiment.
Right.
The sentiment, but we look at that sentiment, we take how do people feel? And that's one of those soft questions you ask, which is always are you comfortable? Are you somewhat comfortable? We have found, there's no doubt, and it follows patterns that you would suspect. Every time the reporting comes out, for instance, when the Delta variant over the summer and fall was discovered, sentiment dipped. People got a little bit more concerned, maybe a little less apt to travel. However, the leisure traveler, which is our traveler, not the business traveler, the leisure travel world continues to see a significant side of confidence. But you find also there is a 10 to 15% of the population that just isn't going to feel comfortable probably until someone signals an all clear.
Right.
And that's just there's that group of folks, whether they could have pre-existing conditions or they just are not safe, they don't feel comfortable with it, they're not. And those folks, you realize that's going to be there in some shape, but that number has continued to decrease over the last several months, especially as we get into the holidays, where people's outlook for 2022 is significantly more positive. You
Sure.
get that feel that people are booking their vacations in our world. They've already got them booked. They're booking at a higher level than they did in 2019. So you're seeing that pattern already. Occupancy levels are significantly higher than even 2019, which they were pretty high going into 19. But you do see people making their plans and looking to travel in 2022, which is fantastic for our industry.
Yeah, I mean, that is fantastic, and that people are, yeah, that fear has to wane at some point, even if this thing is going to be here to stay, right? And we all acknowledge that life has to go on, and it can't be delayed, indefinitely. So I love
Yeah, and part of
hearing
that
that
life
that's
that you're
actually
talking
happening.
about, yeah, what you're talking about, Pete, which is the second part of your question, which is, yeah, how are people getting on with life, getting back to the office? And
Right.
that's now the big question. And as you mentioned before, as you were, we won't call it experimenting, but as you were rolling out work from home 1 day a week as an incentive, as hey, here's what you can get for good work done. We were struggling with that as an organization, the trade association. How do you do this? Who should be able to work from home? Yeah, where our finance team has been working in the office almost every day since March because they have access to systems that they could only get when they're in the office, which is changing.
Yep.
Uh, we're finally getting on with things like ebill.com or bill.com, so that way we can get away from physical signing of checks and things which tie us more to the office. Obviously, we realize that most of us, or almost all functions, could be done from home. The question is the great debate between, all right, you've got a lease, you have facilities, you're paying for them. Are we going to use them, and how much time and productivity are we losing or gaining, all depending on your job role? And I think
Right.
that's an important one for everyone listening, right? What is my job role? What am I supposed to do? We had this debate amongst a number of association executives earlier this week. Do millennials or your 20 to 30-year-old worker really care about FaceTime in the office anymore? We're so used to FaceTime, but do they care? Do they see it as necessary that they need to spend some time with the CEO in order to be promoted? Or do they believe they should be promoted on their merit? Or better yet, they're not going to be with your company long enough to worry about it. So
Well,
after 2 or 3 years, they're moving on. These are just all the things that were out there that before we get to the how are our members figuring it out, those were some of the issues that you could see on the table today that we're trying to figure out even for our small trade association.
well, what was the consensus, if there was one, on how important that really is?
It was all over the board. I think
Okay.
that people realized there was a couple of small organizations that have gone fully virtual. But even for those who have gone fully virtual, if your organization has decided everyone can work from home, there was still a once a quarter, once every 2 months time where everyone got together in person. So they weren't giving up seeing each other in person. They were just saying your day-to-day job responsibilities didn't require a physical location outside of your home for you to be successful,
Right.
which is a little different than, well, there's no need to collaborate. And they realized as we talk via Zoom and as we talk about, it's much harder. It is harder to interact sometimes. It's harder to get a word in edgewise. Nonverbal cues are a little bit more difficult to read on a screen of 20 than if we're all sitting around a table, which is easy to scan and you can see someone's movements and you can see someone who wants to talk. There's a lot of subtleties that everyone realized you don't pick up with and you pick up on in person that, and I've even incorporated this into what we do at the trade association. You do need 1 or 2 days a week in person to have those type of interactions. To, if nothing else, in my opinion, to keep the bonds between your people and the culture you try to create stronger. So those aren't lost. It's like a muscle. If it's not exercised, it atrophies.
Yeah, so culture is such a big topic right now, and I was at a conference 2 weeks ago. It was the conference of staffing, IT staffing companies, and Society for Information Management, which is basically a group of CIOs, and the conferences overlapped for the first time this year, and so there were some joint sessions, and that was the topic. How do you have a culture if you're virtual? What does that even mean anymore? And the rules are being rewritten. We know that there's going to be winners and losers, from that. I want to talk about that for a minute. I'm struggling with it because as much as I love the flexibility and freedom, I also have to acknowledge that you do lose a lot, and you have to work really hard to maintain and create, build, whatever it's going to be, a culture. And every organization is going to have to figure that out without any roadmap. And yeah, I've almost come full circle to some degree where the native, internet users, the young professionals, I think they need it more than folks like us, where we've gone most of our career with those in-person connections. And so we don't need those as much anymore because relationships already exist. And we have a big network, where young folks who maybe don't have a great place to work at home and are isolated, if they don't have a family around, and are still trying to ramp up their career, that's going to be hard for them. So it's almost kind of the opposite of what I would expect. And I would have thought the young professionals would really be great and take to it, but I think they crave the office interaction more so than older professionals. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I also agree. I do, and I also have found that one thing that in-person learning taught us, if you're outside of a standard production-like job that can easily be measured remote, if I asked you to produce 10 widgets a day, and you produce 10 widgets a day, and I realize you're being productive because the widgets are being produced, or there are these tasks that I believe are going to take X amount of hours, so I can measure your productivity. I find that if you think back to your first job, and I started working when I believe I could get your workers permit when you were 15 years old in the state of Michigan, started working fast food, and you work your way up doing all the different types of jobs that you might do. After 7 or 8 years, you find yourself finally out of college, right? But you realized how to work, and you've realized the responsibility of work. And you've probably realized too what happens if you don't do your job well, because you've probably been dismissed from a job or two because you thought maybe it was okay to call in sick because you'd rather go hang out with your buddies than you would if you had to go in on a Saturday morning. It was just, although the world of how to work and how to be responsible, it's much more difficult to convey when you're doing it over the computer, and people have a bit more of a trust me factor where you might not be online or you might be in front of a camera. How do you make sure you're getting your work done? And how do you stay motivated when you're 23, 24, 25, 26? How do you know that you're doing the work the right way? And that's just a more of a challenge than it is if you could be hand-on experience. And I learned so much from the tag-along experience when I was a young attorney. It was sitting in a room at an ad hoc basis. Someone said, hey, come on and listen to this conference call. Come listen, come learn. We can do this real quick. Now it has to be much more purposeful. It's to be a scheduled meeting. It has to be a formal way that managers have to spend a lot more time thinking through how this is going to work in order to give younger workers all of that informal training that comes other than watching maybe the standardized training video you're going to watch. How do you get that learning through osmosis while you're at home or virtually? That's the more difficult thing in my
Yeah,
opinion.
it's in the margins there, right? It's that subtle thing that you can schedule training, but it's going to be formal in nature. By doing that, we had our office Christmas party last night, and I was able to spend some time with a few of our young employees who I otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to engage with, because I don't get to walk by them in the office like I used to and ask them how their weekend was, or see them on Friday and ask about their weekend plans or whatever that might be. Just those little conversations, or they don't have the opportunity to see me in the break room and pick my brain on something. And so it has to be scheduled now. And that's much easier said than done. Yeah, the practicality of that just isn't there. So I think that evolution is going to continue for a while. I don't think anyone ultimately knows where this is going to land, and what that right balance is. But you're seeing your members have to figure this out on the fly, right?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what are the transformations that you're seeing, that for the industry that you're excited about.
One of the biggest transitions, let's just talk this transformation that had to take place to becoming technology companies. That to me was the first thing. So let's go back to March or April, when all of a sudden you had to start worrying about, you were talking about things such as, you put up plexiglass shields at a resort check-in? Are you going to utilize face masks or face covering? Well, that was mandatory that you had to wear face masks. And you realize that that was important for a lot of folks, and really for our salespeople. Like, how do you sell with a mask on? So much of it is nonverbal. How do you communicate? How do you feel comfortable communicating and reading a person's body language when it's being hidden that way? We saw, though, that technology was something that took over quickly. That's one big example, was resort check-in. All of a sudden, and a big part of the process and a big part of the experience at a resort had to deal with your check-in, a marketing desk, maybe having an opportunity to talk to an owner when they arrived about possibly taking a timeshare tour while they were there. There were so many things that took place that were planned, that were part of the standard operating procedure. Then all of a sudden, you needed to go to keyless contact. You had to be able to pull into spot number 2, you talked to somebody, or they came by, or you drove on by, and you got some type of RIF reader, or some type of quick scan of a document, and before you knew it, you had your digital key to your room, and away you went. And you didn't have to go inside of the lobby anymore. Your keys may have been either just delivered to you or waiting for you within a I'd say, contact way, and then you were off and doing your thing. Then people wanted to contact you still. And the questions were, well, should we set up iPads in rooms, perhaps, if people wanted to talk to some folks, or if they were interested in taking a tour, could you do it all virtually? So some people started selling via Zoom, just like this. Let's set up a Zoom call, and realize that you can make it much more convenient for an owner or for someone interested in buying the product than having to be there in person. Okay, yeah, I'll take a half hour or an hour like this. That's fine. My kids can keep playing in the background. They can keep doing their thing. I can give you my undivided attention via an electronic means, and we could do it on my terms.
Right.
So now you had to have the system. So our members had to shift, even though they were somewhat downshifting from the number of maybe resort operational people they had, or salespeople, because they didn't have as many people showing up at the resort. They still needed IT technical support, and they needed to grow in those areas in a hurry. They needed to expand and be ready for, well, what do we do with all these reservations that were, so you need customer service folks to be there to talk to you, or you needed a great web team to make sure web was constantly being updated and information was being pushed out. How do you get your message heard above all other noise? Because guess what? Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, right? Ads are going up through the roof because everyone's taking a digital advertising. How do you get your message now to people, and how are they going to listen, and who cares, right? We're getting bombarded with messaging like we never had before. So we saw this transformation for our members when they realized, okay, the product still works, but now is the time for us to start thinking about the future. Now is the time for us to make changes to our organization to meet the needs of the traveler now, years into advance. And you find that that's the big question for the last year and a half. It was already being asked before, but now it wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity.
Yeah, it's not thinking about the future. It's the future just, it was dropped on our lap, right? Now we have to figure out how to live in it and deal with it. What a fascinating time. And you know, this phrase, I continue to say phrase because it just resonates with me. There's going to be winners and losers from that. What are some of the most innovative things that you've seen so far in that regard?
Well, the winners, I think the winners are the ones that are looking at breaking some of the old tendencies that we believe to be tried and true in our industry, some of the same marketing tendencies, the belief about the way or how your people travel. They've told us now loud and clear, interestingly enough, that your owners and travelers want to go on vacation. They certainly do. But now it's no longer just about the accommodations, it's about the experience. And we've seen a shift. Pete, you and I talk a lot about books we read,
right?
And your Christmas gift is coming here shortly. But the experience economy was a book that I've had the pleasure of being able to read recently. And it is a book that it's one that's well known to others. It was not well known to me. And if you ever want to read a book, and if your listeners want to read a book that can kind of truly change the way they look at the offerings that are out there that are being teed up to them every single day, and you realize, why is an escape room so popular? Where does it fit on the grid of an experience? Where is it? Why is it so popular? Why do you see so many of these rooms popping up, or these escape rooms? Where do you see, if you've looked, my Facebook feed is littered with the Van Gogh experience, right? There's a
Right.
Van Gogh. What makes that Van Gogh experience? It's much different than the escape room. We're still physically in it, but what is it that makes it different? And ultimately, how do you monetize it? Why is it popular? Why are there winners and losers in the experience economy? Because there's some bad experiences out there too. What
Sure.
makes it worth it? And why would we spend our hard-earned time and money on it? And that's one of the things that our members have asked themselves over the last 2 or 3 years. And we've got some folks that have really put the theories to work in offering some really unique experiences that can be had through the companies and through being an owner, giving you access to experiences you're not going to find in other places. You even saw one of our major members, Wyndham Destinations, where I had worked, change their name over the last year to Travel and Leisure.
Right.
That was very purposeful to understand where they're going as a company, understanding that they're more than just, say, a timeshare company. They're providing travel experiences in a way that, and curated experiences in a way that maybe haven't seen before in our industry. And that's something that we're really excited about at the trade association. You can tell your members are. They have everything from pro golfers that you see, the Hilton Grand Vacations Tournament of Champions coming to Orlando in January. That's been there for a number of years, rebranded as a different developer for a while. That in itself is a mega experience of country music stars and sports and athletes and LPGA players that you get to experience a lot of times as a timeshare owner, which you don't get to experience that way if you're not.
So, a lot of your members are clients of Four Corner Resources, and so I'm connected to a lot of folks on LinkedIn who
Yeah.
share this stuff, and it looks like a party nonstop with,
Yeah. Yeah.
like you said, the concerts that are happening, and it is certainly not how I would have thought of timeshare prior to that, and not my own personal experiences with timeshare, but it seems to me that that transformation was beginning already, but perhaps
Yeah.
has just been fast forwarded, through all these changes that we've had to deal with.
It has. It has been certainly accelerated. I think people have had the time, and where you see the members staffing up, you see now people in data analytics more than you ever have before. Data and information, just like in every other part of business, has become a huge part of the timeshare industry. Digital marketing, no longer do you be relying upon what would be face-to-face marketing or in-person marketing efforts that you might be used to in many places in Orlando and amusement parks. Information now has gone digital, and the consumer is a much more educated consumer than they had before. They read, they understand how to find this stuff. I mean, they read stuff on the internet, they can find stuff on the internet. There's so much information they can get at their fingertips. You realize you have a better educated customer, and you can find them in different ways and provide them resources, and you can get them information so that way they're aware of your product and aware of what they can do if they become members of yours. That has become a significant portion, and it's got to be part of a playbook for each and every one of our developer members. And if they're not utilizing advanced data analytic techniques to understand who their best customer is and where they can get their next customer, they're clearly behind.
But it sounds like they're doing it.
They're doing it. Some are doing it better. Some are give more time and effort. And really, I kind of feel like a good part of what we do in the timeshare industry is more like open source software. Consider it
Okay.
more, right? That there's an open
You're
source
you're
out
gonna
there
have
that,
to explain that a little
yeah,
bit.
I'll
I
give you
like
this one.
it. I
I'll give
like
you
where
this
you're
one.
going, but tell
The
me about it.
code, the plan in its basics, quite frankly, is I won't say easy to follow because it's not. It's easily understood. You have great experiences plus fantastic accommodations, wonderful guest experience equals, yeah, happy owner. And for the business, from a dollars and cents perspective, it means positive things. Easy to say,
Yeah, that's so
right?
easy,
Yeah,
right?
easy.
Just make sure
Well,
all of your employees are friendly constantly and everything is
yeah. So
clean
we
and
know it.
working well,
Yeah,
and yeah,
yeah.
no
Right. The
no big
playbook
deal.
is there. Who executes it right the best is generally it. If we go to
Right.
our college football analogy, I kind of know what Alabama, you kind of know what they're going to do to you, right? This is not, you can go to their practices, you can watch all the practices you want to, you know what plays being called, but their execution their practice and the buy-in is at a level that is different than other people. So therefore, everyone can't just simply copy what they do and get the same success.
For sure.
So you could go out there and hire the same vendors. And again, what do you do with the information? How is it integrated in your system? Are your systems talking to one another? And is your communication and PR communications team linked up with your web development team and all those players strong to know how it's going to be used in the business, and your legal team's firing on all cylinders? That's what we're talking about. Those who are able to run the game plan the best. And then, of course, add their own secret sauce. And some of our members have different advantages. If you're a Marriott Bonvoys member, that the folks at Marriott have an opportunity to market to you, or you can use your Bonvoy points to stay at a hotel, or you can stay at a timeshare. That's certainly an advantage to your marketing efforts and to what you have. So each person, again, has their own secret sauce. Although the game plan, quite frankly, some of these game plans are basic in nature and known.
Right, right. Well, what do you see coming for the future that's not already here? Any secrets that you can share
Yeah.
along those
Well,
lines?
I think the secret sauce is that for our industry, we're going to continue to see our industry consolidate. We're going to continue to move to a place where we have fewer overall players in the space, but you're going to have bigger brands and bigger companies. And I think I know this can be considered to be a good thing. It's a natural evolution of the industry. It's a natural evolution of the way that industries grow. For us, it means we need to look to the future as to where we talked about these resort experiences, Pete. These experiences are going to become just as much the product as the wonderful accommodations and the guest services that you get as to why you want to be a member of one of these vacation clubs. It's
Yeah, I could
happening.
see people
Yeah.
basing their decision off of a list of those experiences. Kind of like if you're going to take a cruise, and maybe this is a bad analogy, but I'll look at the destination perhaps, or the quality of the ship, but I'm going to look at what I get to do. Right. So it's not
Yeah.
just the brand of the ship, it's what am I going to do with my time? And it resonates really well with me and probably everyone else, where if I look at my family vacations over the years, the ones that are memorable, the ones that we like to try to repeat, and chase that feeling of just enjoyment and fun, are the ones where we were doing stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
sitting on the beach, while that may be relaxing for me and appealing, from a family standpoint, from an experience standpoint, the things where we've created memories and unique experiences. Those are the best vacations by far.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah, we're
and
looking at one that, if you take a look at all the different ways that an experience can be powerful, one of the biggest charities we support, and you've been part of a big fundraising effort there once before, the Crystal House Open, which happens in Orlando quite
absolutely,
annually, which will be
where
back next year.
I was part of the winning foursome,
I know.
the
I
weak
have
link part,
Yeah,
but
we've had some good memories on that golf course. So this year, my family decided to make an investment in a new school they've opened up at Crystal House in Jamaica. A bit unfortunate as far as timing due to hurricanes first, and then all of a sudden the pandemic, which has stunted the growth of the school a little bit. But we're fortunate enough to be able to have helped with the school and help contribute. And in May, we'll not only spend a little bit of time on the beaches there in Jamaica, but 3 or 4 of the days is going to be submersed in the culture of the school,
oh
of
wow,
actually
neat.
experiencing school, going out there and helping out for a day, understanding some of the other cultural aspects of Jamaica that surround that school in the area. And I know that's going to be an impactful one for me and the family. I'm looking forward to it already because we've gone there to Jamaica to vacation a few times. I'm like you, I'm really happy at the beach, playing a little golf, swim, do all the fun stuff, but really understanding culture and the aspects of what travel does to help you understand the world. This is one of those that we're really excited about. And that to me are things that make travel so special and that our members are now focusing on more than they ever have before. It's more than just what do you do on site and your on site amenities. It's truly now once you leave the resort, or what can they bring to you that's a unique experience that leads to a lasting memory that allows you to enjoy that experience. And not only that, I honestly think it's also leading up to it. There are so many amusement parks have done a great job of it. There's a buildup. You go to Disney, you get your vacation booked, in comes your bracelets. You used to get the bracelets that used to come personalized for each member of your family.
The
All the
hype.
things, yeah, the hype, right? It's the buildup. And honestly, studies show that that buildup, and you call it the hype, but the anticipation in the event is oftentimes more exciting than the event itself. And
Interesting. Okay,
yeah,
that is, I get it, because sometimes it can be, you build it up in a way, and just
yeah,
to use Disney. I mean, I see those. I've been to Disney more times than I can count. We've been annual, pass holders, and the kids, have grown up there. But I still see those commercials, and it brings out a feeling, the magical, feeling, and you want it. But I know right now, at this point in my life, like my kids, I would not have that same. They're too old for that, to sit on Main Street and watch the parade with the same excitement that they used to. But you're right. I mean, that I've never thought of it. That would be. I'd love to see those studies, because it totally makes sense. So yeah,
and actually, it's somewhat applicable. Maybe not exactly, but when it comes to the job too, and I think that's something that I've had to pay attention to. The onboarding process is that anticipation. The day that someone gets that letter of acceptance, or you get the letter saying the job is yours, to the day that you start, is kind of, we'll call it a magical time, right?
right.
That's a very important period of time in which the experience and the anticipation of what they're going to be getting is key. And that's one thing, as I've gone through this journey too, as we're looking to hire a couple people, I'm thinking to myself, all right, how do I design that part of the job experience? So that way it's not just a formal, well, here's your employee handbook and this, but how do you make it, what's that gift basket look like? Or beyond the gift basket, what are the calls from the people, or a call from a member, or this and that, or what are you going to do to design those days so there's something there that continues to build the excitement, so a person really feels attached to that job before they even show up day one?
It's huge. We talk about that a lot internally. We think about that a lot, both with our own hires as well as what we observe our clients doing. And some get it really right, and it is so powerful to that employee to feel like they're part of the team before they even arrive. And it
Yeah.
doesn't even take significant effort. It just takes effort and paying attention, and placing importance on it up front. Um, I just sent my parents on a vacation. It was one that I wanted them to do, and I got to see it through someone else's eyes in a way that I otherwise wouldn't have. And I sent them somewhere that I'd gone. It was an experience that my family had. I wanted them to have as well. And my dad was like a kid, asking questions and planning, and he spent probably as much time thinking and planning for the vacation as they did actually being on the vacation. So to your point, I mean, this just happened 2 weeks ago. They got back, and um, it was just a really neat thing to see. And so it's a powerful emotions. When you work 50 weeks a year,
Mhm.
and then you get to use those couple of weeks for those memories. You want to get it right,
Yep.
and I think having that anticipation, going in is really big.
Yeah,
That's really
it's
neat.
exciting. It's exciting, and it's something that we need to look at. And it's a very important thing, I think, even today. It's a contemporary issue as it continues, as things continue to evolve. And actually, as you look to be competitive in the workplace, I think those things are important. It is, it is a battle for competition at almost every single spot on the team. There is no easy hire out there right now where wonderful people are just lining up, and they're really, it's, you get them at the price you want, and you get them at the job responsibilities they're exactly looking for. It's tough, especially in some of these areas of high growth like tech. Tech is a tough one, especially here in Washington, D.C. And we found one of the things that we're dealing with overall, when jobs have no borders, then
Right.
then your geographic, what you used to have as a geographic advantage, sometimes now is a disadvantage.
Yep.
And
Yes. There's a huge split, divide right now, where the companies who are insisting that employees be local and on site are having to compete against those who are letting their employees sit everywhere. And IT in particular, in where you don't have to be on site, right? It's not like a resort where someone has to be there to clean the room. It's creating a lot of havoc for companies, and especially those who aren't eager to change their ways. And that's happening while the compensation war is taking place. We just updated our salary guide for 2022, and I was shocked by the increase. I would say on average 15% is the salary increase, and not just in IT, in every professional area we support, finance, marketing, legal, administrative, you name it, up across the board. And employees are more demanding now than ever because they can be. Just like your owners, I'm sure, are more demanding now than ever as well. So we're everything's changing around us as we speak. That is for sure.
Agreed. 100% agreed. It's been a dynamic environment. Let's leave it at that.
So let's leave it at that. But before we do, I'm going to ask this. When are your members going to start accepting Bitcoin as payments? I have to ask you that, Jason.
It's a good question. It's an excellent question. And I just saw yesterday, we'll leave this to make this particular podcast somewhat frozen at a particular point in time, because it was just yesterday, I believe, that the governor, Ron DeSantis in Florida, is looking at allowing certain agency payments or payments to be made to agencies in various types of cryptocurrencies, in Bitcoin, and perhaps I think even exploring what other options should be to pay bills to the state, which I thought was phenomenal. I mean, absolutely progressive in thinking in a way that gives more validity to alternative forms of currencies, or currencies that are not necessarily U.S. government dollars or bonds or the currencies we think is traditional. I've been asking this question of our members now and starting to chide them a little bit. I tend to get a little bit of resistance, and I think many of them are still figuring out how to put it into their overall cash flow model, which is probably the first thing they're looking at, which is many of our members hypothecate or they securitize loans. So loan payments are still very important. And knowing it's a variable currency, and it is, as you well know, it is a little bit volatile in the cryptocurrency market. So,
I think Bitcoin's down like 7% today. So
if you're watching your day to day, the people who do overnight treasuries for 0.01% on their money, this might blow their brains if you could go 7 to 10% in a day. But I think it's not too far away. I believe that there are 2 or 3 different operators, and I think it's going to happen maybe even overseas first. Or better yet, we might see it in Mexico or in places where developers start getting a little bit more creative, who don't mind holding crypto on their balance sheets for a while to take a bet. But when you can get Bitcoin, and I was just at the local gas station a couple of days ago, I looked in there and the ATM serves up Bitcoin at a gas station. There you have to realize, there might be something, this might not be going away for too long. And are you willing to a certain extent to make that play and show, and quite honestly, it shows a level of progressiveness in thought and understanding, and it may draw in a group of people who wouldn't otherwise buy your product.
I agree. I mean, there are voters now who are single issue voters, and that's the issue. I mean, they're going to support candidates who support that. I mean, it is almost as if every day that goes by, a new institution, a new city. DeSantis yesterday came out of the blue with that. I think maybe he was taking his lead a little bit from Mayor Suarez down in Miami, who was one of the first ones to come out and say, we want to embrace this. We want this to be a hub. And what that exactly means, I'm not sure we know, but the momentum seems to be growing. Even if the price isn't always growing, the momentum is undeniable. And I'm pleasantly surprised so far with, I think, the overall. I mean, there was just a hearing, I don't know if you saw it, about this with the top crypto exchanges in front of Congress, and some of the statements that were made are just, it's an uninformed group. And I think, being, a little bit of an older crowd, I'll say it, you can't, since you have to, these are the guys you have to deal with all the time, don't necessarily get it yet. But, I think the younger generation is all for it, and that train's not going to slow down anytime.
No, I think that genie is out of the bottle. And for those that, and that's, I would never look down or think otherwise of people who continue to invest in traditional markets. The more I learn in that space, the more my head tends to spin. Just even scratching the surface of everything that is going on in those marketplaces today. It's deep, and to me, it's exciting. And how it translates into our business, it's inevitable for it to move into our world. It's inevitable.
It
It's
is.
just
I
a
mean,
matter of time.
you mentioned the treasuries, you mentioned, so, when you add in decentralized finance and what that can be, and
Mhm.
what that can represent, in different, ways of transacting payments and handling,
Mhm.
corporate finances. And then even, the NFT space, I think, has a lot of potential for the timeshare industry too, for those who are innovative and can figure out how to leverage it. So,
We just had an idea. So it's probably who knows if my board members are listening to this or not, but one of the things we were even thinking about doing, Pete, at our next meeting is taking pictures of people and then basically creating an NFT for each one of them so they own their own likeness and image.
I love it.
And just delivering the wallet to them right there on site. So now you now own your own image, which technically right now, and as you probably know this too, I've already gone out there and bought our domain names in the the Bitcoin and Ethereum, and you name it, all different types of webs and hashtags that are out there to be bought. They're all to be bought out there in the world of crypto right now.
And even though I think I'm somewhat deep into that space, I realize I've not even scratched the surface. I went down the rabbit hole a couple of days ago with Sandbox, and learning about the metaverse, in the digital property space. And you can't help but think there's some synergy to be had with digital property and actual property, from a vacation ownership
Sure.
standpoint.
I don't know. People, employees who know about this stuff will be very valuable. Believe me, there will be a need. The need might not be great today, but in a year or two, the need for people to be able to understand that space and how it affects their business and what their owners are doing or what their opportunities are. If you're looking at an immersive 3D or metaverse-like experience at your resort, or if you want to own those images or design, there's a lot that can be done. We may not have figured it out yet, but you have to realize that's the next unexplored frontier of where people can go with the experience world.
Is any, yeah, I know, I told you I wouldn't keep you all day, and we're going to do that at this rate. But are any of the members yet doing, virtual tours, at any, significant level yet?
Getting there, there had been a lot of talk a few years back and discussions about creating virtual sales rooms. I think people are doing it virtually, but the one thing that still hasn't had a full breakthrough, but others have been experimenting with, I know, which is a 3D immersive experience in the sales room. I believe that's your next place where you're going to see that technology. You throw on the Oculus goggles
Yeah,
and put in the earphones and be there on the beach all of a sudden and experience it 360 from the views.
right.
Experience a ski resort. Let's go take a run down the slopes to the ski out access somewhere in Beaver Creek. Those things can be very transformative, or a full room's worth of sales centers. That's also, I believe, on the horizon for next gen submersive experiences that people can have at a sales center at a resort.
Yes, but I think we have to acknowledge, or at least I will say, it's not going to replace the real thing ultimately, no matter how much Mark Zuckerberg wants that to happen. I still want to feel the ocean, the water and the waves, and feel the snow, not just see it virtually.
Well,
So that's
if one day Ready Player One is reality, if that movie becomes reality, then that's going to be a time. Hopefully that's a place far, far beyond my time on Earth. I
maybe,
hope.
maybe we'll see, or next month, one of
Or
the
next
two.
month. Or next
Well,
month.
and because that's really it. I mean, if you think about this conversation, and prior to getting on, we decided we weren't really going to decide what course it would take. We'd let it happen naturally. But almost everything we've talked about wasn't even a thought 2 years ago.
Sure.
And that to me is both terrifying and exhilarating as a business owner, as a father, as just a person, on the planet, where we're writing the future every day. And it sounds as if ARDA, your members, are doing an excellent job with that. You've handled this extremely well and have come out on the other side better for it in a way. Is that a fair statement?
I think it is. I think it's if there's some takeaways, the biggest takeaways I've have from the last 2.5 years, first and foremost, action's important. And if you delay or hesitate, that could be that's winning and losing right there. You've got to feel confident in your abilities, know where your boundaries are, but at the same time, be confident in making decisions and being bold and having a bold vision and willingness. And I'm not going to use the C word, change here that way, but you have to have a willingness to look at where you are every few months and say, what is that we can do to be better? And if it requires something that's painful, do not avoid it. And that's the one thing I believe we've learned over the last 2.5 years. You can do some pretty drastic things. You can make some bold moves and changes. If you've got buy-in from your organization, they believe in you, and you can do it, do it. And that's the way you keep ahead of the game. And that's the way that you be successful. That's one thing I've learned. And that's why I believe all these things, such as lots of, hey, we're not doing Bitcoin today. Well, don't say that necessarily. 6 months from now, your tune might change. You might find it to be worth it. You may find it to be a whole new marketplace that you haven't seen before. And you may not know what kind of benefit it might bring today, but it could be in 6 months, and you've got to keep your eyes open to it.
Great. I think that's a great statement, and we're going to use that as a quote. Just a heads up, because it really is. That's a powerful thing, and those who pay attention and heed that are going to benefit. I agree with you 1,000%. So let's end there. And if, as always, if you have any feedback for us, hirecalling@fourcornerresources.com. I always want to hear suggestions, thoughts, ideas on new topics or episodes that we could do. And Jason, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. You are super busy, and this is extremely generous of you to come on, and it was an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much.
Anytime, Pete. Well, we were talking in 6 months about the latest craze. I'm looking forward to whatever it is. I'm looking forward to the follow-up.
I do like the bookmark aspect. So we'll see. We'll go back and see what exactly has changed. And I think we both agree it'll be a lot.
I love it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.